Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for staying tuned. Now we already are doing some simplification of sorts, division of sorts. We looked at rationalization of sorts. We said rationalization of sorts refers to the conversion of a fraction that has a sort as its denominator, or let's put it this way, properly defined, rationalization of sort happens when a fraction has a sort as its denominator. So the best thing to do is to change the denominator to a whole number or rational number. So what you do is to rationalize it. So in rationalizing it, what you do is to multiply both the numerator and the denominator with the sort. Now, we've done this in the last video, so if you've not seen it, you want to go back to the previous video so you'd watch how we resolved this. So I'm going to go ahead with this. Now, this is what we do. Solution to it. Let's just try to solve it. So what we have is root 18. When I say root 18, I mean the square root of 18 or whatever root it is. Root 18 times 20, the root 20, and root 24 divided, by the root 8 times root 30. Now in this case, just look at something. Every one of them you can't really slash because there's nothing common here, they are all different. But you can pick each one of them and turn them to find the factors and then see how you bring out certain denominator or certain numbers or figures that are exactly the same. So if you have one in the numerator side which is the same or tallies with that one or some in the denominator, you can slash, you can cut that is, you bring them to lowest them. Now let's pick them one by one. I'll pick 18 first. What is 18? 18 is the same thing as, yes of course, 18 times 1 is the same thing as 9 times 2. But then when you're doing this, watch out for numbers that have a perfect square root. Perfect square root. So what is 18 also? 18 is the same thing as, 4, that's 3 is going to be 6, 3 times 2, 6 times 3 times 3, 9, 6 times 3, 5. Now there's no other number that will give us 18. There's no other combination. Now in looking at this, which pair do we pick? We won't pick this because 18 doesn't have a perfect square root. Remember what we're having is square root 18, so we'll have to do something like this. So we'll have to look for a pair that has a perfect square root. This doesn't have, so this doesn't have, this has, this doesn't have, this doesn't have, this doesn't have. So we'll pick this because of 9. So this is going to represent 18 here. So what we'll have, we'll come here, we'll put it as the square root of 9 times 2. This have been done, have been transformed to this. So let's pick the next. The next is 20. What is 20? Let's call it, what is root 20? Root 20 is the same thing as, of course, 20 times 1, which is not going to be, or what is 20? 10 times 2. And what is 20? 20 is the same thing as 4 times 5. So which of these has a number that has a perfect square root? 20 doesn't have a perfect square root, so it's not going to work. 1 doesn't have one, so this pair won't work. Then 10 doesn't have a perfect square root, and 2 doesn't have a perfect square root, so this pair won't work. In this pair, 4 has a perfect square root, which is actually 2. 5 doesn't have a perfect square root, at least we have something. So this is like half. So we want to pick this pair. So this pair, 4 times 5 represents 20. So this one we have 4 times 5. Now why? Because the square root of 4 is 2 by the time we separate the square root sides. Now let's pick the next one, 24. 24, what's 24? 24 is the same thing as 24 times 1. 24 times 1 is 24. And 24 is the same thing as 12 times 2. And 24 is the same thing as 4 times 6. Okay, let's do it 4 times 6. And 24 is the same thing as 3 times, okay, 2 times 3, 3 times 8. Good. Now, let's see which of this pair would represent this one adequately in such a way that it will balance with what we're doing in sorts. Now, this doesn't have a perfect square root. This doesn't have, so this won't work, this won't work. So this pair not going to work. Now, this doesn't have a perfect square root, so this pair will not work. This one, 4, has a perfect square root, and the square root of 4 is what? 2. So, but this doesn't have, but at least this one has something, so even we just give it half. So let's start. Now this doesn't have, and this doesn't have a perfect square root, so this one qualifies. So this one to represent 24. So it's going to be times the square root of 4 times 6. So we're representing 24 with 4 times 6. So let's draw the line again. Then this is 8. Let's see 8. What is 8? 8 is the same thing as 8 times 1. Now, and 8 is the same thing as 4 times 2. Right? So there's no other, you can't go further. Or just put 2 times 4, the same thing as 4 times 2. Now, when you see this doesn't have a perfect square root, so it won't work. This doesn't have a perfect square root. But this has a perfect square root, which is actually 2. And this doesn't have a perfect square root. So which pair would work? Is it this pair or this pair? I believe this is correct, because this one has at least one of the values that has a perfect square root. So we'll pick this pair. So 8 to be represented here by 4 times 2. We bring this times square. Then what is 30? Bring 30 here. This is 30. What is 30? 30 is the same thing as 30 times 1, right? What is 30? 30 is the same thing as 15 times 2. And 30 is the same thing as 3 times, it's going to be 6 times 5. That's 30. And, is there any other number? I don't think so. Okay. 30 times 1, and then 2 times 15, and then 5 times 6. Any other number? 3 times 5, 15. 2 times 10 times 3. Another one will be 10 times 3. Now, from what we have here, 30 doesn't have a perfect square root. 1 doesn't have a perfect square root. 15 doesn't have a perfect square root. No, 16. 2 doesn't have a perfect square root. And then 5 times 6 is 30. And then it doesn't have a perfect square root. 6 also doesn't have a perfect square root. 10 doesn't have a perfect square root. And 3 doesn't have a perfect square root. From this case, you see that none of them represents. None. 4 times what will give you 30? You can't. Nothing times 4 will give you 30. No whole number. And then 9. Let's see. 4, 6. No. 4, 2, 9. 4, 9. 3 times 3, 9. 2 times 2 is 9 times what will give you 13. 9 times 1, 9 times 2, 18 times 3, 27. No number. So from here we've seen it. Now I'm being realistic to tell you that I'm solving this for the first time. So you see, it's not just you go, you solve. You say, oh, this one knows it. I'm racking my brain, doing the working. So you also see that. So from what we've seen, we can't even use 4. 4 has a perfect square root. 4 doesn't appear here. 9 has a perfect square root. 9. Which other number has a perfect square root? 16. 16 cannot come in here. So we'll leave the square, and we'll leave this number here as this. So we'll move forward. Now let's go to the next step. Have we got this? Now the next will be to bring this all here. So let's just bring it all here. What we're having square root of 9, we can separate them. separate it, just like they both have separate their meal. Then this here is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And then this is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. Bring it over here. This is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 30. We've not seen any way we can bring this 30 down. So let's do it this way. So what's the square root of 9? 9. The square root of 9 is 3, because 3 is the number that you multiply by itself to give 9. So square root of 9 is the same thing as 3, right? So let's go. So 3 is going to be 3 times 2 times square root of 4 is 2. 2 times root 5 times square root of 4 is 2. So 2 times root 6 all over square root of 4 is 2 times root 2 times root 30. So what do we do here? We'll say, like your primary school or elementary mathematics, those that are like will slash each other. So this will slash this, and this one here, one here, one here, one here, one, and then which other? All these are gone. These are what we have here. So this is going to remain 3 times 2, and then root 5 and root this. Now this is it when it comes in. Now what is 30? 30 is root 5 times root 6. I've just seen it. I never saw it before. I'm just saying it. 30 is the same thing as 5 times 6. Now, before I erased it, I had, what is 30? 30 is the same thing as what? 5 times 6, 30. So that means if I take this and this, it will take this one off. So this and this takes equals 5 times 2, take this off. So what remains up here is going to be 3 times 2. So math is sweet. You love it. You keep on saying. So 3 times 1, 3 times 1, 3 times 2 is 1. 3 times 2 is 6. So what remains here? 1 times 1 is 1. Times 1 is 1. So the final answer, 6. Thank you so much. Now, you've seen this, you want to try your hands. You see that you take it to try by yourself. There are different ways. Now, I could have brought this and I've written it out again to make this, or split this one to be 5 times 6. It becomes easier by writing it as root 30 as 5 times root 6. So 5 will cancel 5, 6 will cancel 6. I could do that. But try to answer. If you have a question, please ask. Now, thank you. Now, let's see the next video. Thanks.